Thanks, Joel. I'm really excited to lead this session today with two of our National Geographic explorers. It's an exciting time at National Geographic because this year we turn 133 years old. But I think, as you'll see through the voice and the work of these explorers, just like in nature, our institution continues to adapt and evolve to meet the daunting challenges of our modern day. You know, fearlessness and innovation has been in our DNA since our founding, and you'll see these two reflect that. But business has also been in our DNA since our founding. It was our founders in 1888 who decided they would bring forward the National Geographic magazine to tell the great stories of science and exploration, and to use the revenues from that magazine to fund more science and exploration. So if you fast forward the tape to 2021, business is still very much in our DNA. With thanks to the Walt Disney Company, we have an exciting joint venture that brings business across platforms, across products and services to consumers around the world. Indeed, our cable channels, as well as Disney Plus streaming, along with our consumer experiences like travel that we provide and consumer products, and our social media footprint. Those things combined allow us to reach nearly 1 billion people every month. So we couldn't be more excited. We always say we couldn't do what we do without the explorers out there on the front lines of the unknown doing what they do. So this conversation will introduce you to two of them. We're going to go to Argentina to get started, to Agustina Besada. And she comes to us from Argentina today, and she has a very exciting story to tell. So Agustina, welcome.
Thank you, Jean. So how can we unplastify the world? We clearly have a problem with plastic, and let's be honest, recycling is not going to solve it. Hello, I'm Tati Besada. I'm a geo-explorer and co-founder of Unplastify, a social enterprise on a mission to change the human relationship with plastic. How it all started? It actually started with questions. I was working at a recycling center in Brooklyn, literally surrounded by mountains of plastic, and I started wondering what was happening with all the plastics that are not lucky enough to end up in a recycling center. This curiosity took me to embark on an adventure to cross the Atlantic Ocean twice aboard a 36-foot sailboat. And let me tell you that at that point, I never spent more than 24 hours sailing. So I had no idea what I was going to get into and what it was like to sail in the ocean. The first night was terrible. It was freezing cold, rainy, waves from every angle, and we all got sick. But I was determined to see with my own eyes what was happening with plastics in the most remote places on Earth. Throughout the trip, we took samples, and in every sample we took, we found plastic. Whenever we throw plastic away, there is no way. So what did we learn with this trip? We learned that the problem is this relationship we have with this material. The problem is not the material itself, it's its use and abuse. We are using a product, a material that is indestructible to make disposable products. And recycling is not the magic solution. Only 9% of plastic gets recycled. So we need to tackle this problem at source. Prevention is the key. And we need to involve all stakeholders. We need you to help us create this systemic change to avoid single-use plastic. And what do we mean with systemic change? We think we need to change these 3 levels: behavior, operations, and norms. And none of these alone will change the problem. If we create awareness campaigns, but we don't act, nothing will change. If we provide products and new materials, but we don't change culture, it won't change. And if we push for regulation that does not help the transition into these innovations and development of alternatives, it will simply not work. We have to work at these three levels. So how do we unplastify the world? We are a social enterprise because we believe in the power of business to create positive change in the world. We have developed an all-female team and a powerful network of partners, and we accelerate systemic solutions to reduce the use of single-use plastic. But how do we do it? We challenge. We challenge people at these organizations, companies, and governments for them to be the change makers in their own communities. We challenge companies like yours. We develop a diagnosis of the plastic footprint, and we co-design and implement with your employees the strategies to unplastify them, innovating in products, services, operations, and internal policies. This comes with much benefits because we increase employees' engagement and brand awareness and consistency. We challenge teenagers for them to be the change makers of their communities and share and collaborate with their projects with other schools in different countries through a mobile app. And we support regulation at national and subnational level to support this necessary transition. We want to unplastify 1 million people in 5 years. This would translate in 10 million tons of plastic avoided. This is more than the 8 million tons of plastic that enter our oceans every year. So this is how we plan to unplastify the world. But we need you and many other change makers to take this challenge. So join us and let's unplastify the world together. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Augustina. You can see why I said fearlessness is still in our DNA. It's revealed through the work of these ladies we'll be talking to today. So that was a little bit of an overview to give you an idea of the work that Augustina has been involved in. And now we'll turn to Gladys Kolema Zikusoka, who's with us from Uganda and is passionately focused on the challenge of helping to conserve and help mountain gorillas thrive. You know, Gladys knows I had the opportunity through my own work with National Geographic to be on the ground in Rwanda up in the mountains with the gorillas and saw firsthand the magic and the wonder of those incredible beings. But Gladys, I love what you're doing and building a social enterprise to make this work. Just like Augustina, Gladys is going to spend just a few minutes talking about her work, and then we'll go to Q&A. So Gladys, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean, for inviting me to the GreenBiz conference. I started working with mountain gorillas 25 years ago. And ever since I went into Windy Forest as a vet student, I've never stopped. And actually my entrepreneurial journey with wildlife began when I started a wildlife club in my high school in Uganda. And later on, after doing this research in Windy, I became the first veterinarian to work with the country's government agency that manages wildlife, the Uganda Wildlife Authority. And during that time, a lot of things happened that made me realize that I needed to also start thinking about people living around the park. And I'm going to talk about that journey. I became a National Geographic Explorer in 2018, and it's been an amazing experience. The threats to gorillas all over Africa have always been habitat loss because of high human population growth and poaching, where in some countries people eat gorillas, but in Uganda, people don't eat gorillas, in Uganda and Rwanda, but they poach other animals in the forest and gorillas get caught in snares and sometimes get speared. The baby gorilla who you see in the middle of the picture was one of the first cases I had to deal with. This baby gorilla got scabies together with all its family. They went outside the park to eat people's banana plants and they found dirty clothing on a scarecrow. And because gorillas are curious, they touched it and got sick. And this made me realize that I can't protect the gorillas without thinking of the health of the people who live next to the park. So we started conservation through public health in 2003. And together with my husband, Lawrence, who's actually very much into, he's a social entrepreneur, and a vet technician called Stephen. And we have 3 integrated programs where we improve the health of the gorillas and other animals. We also improve the health of the community, and we also improve the livelihoods of the people using a One Health approach to conservation. Amongst the activities we do improving the health of the gorillas, we focus a lot on behavior change communication, and we try and get people to improve on their health practices and also their conservation attitudes and practices. And this lady in the photograph is giving a talk to her community. Through our programs, we've engaged a lot of women and really helped to raise the profile of women in the community. They also give injections for people who want to, to carry out family planning, because as I mentioned in my previous slide, the very high human population growth is a big threat to the survival of the gorillas and their habitat. So one of the other main things we do in our program is we look at diseases in gorillas and compare what people are getting and livestock, so we prevent gorillas getting sick from the people and their livestock that they own. And through our approach, we've been able to contribute to the rise in the gorilla population, which is something that we're really proud about. When I first started with working with mountain gorillas, there were only 650, and the number has almost doubled 25 years later, which is due to a lot of efforts with many partners on the ground. And gorillas are falling sick less often, they're being protected on community land, and people's health habits have really increased. Hand washing facilities have gone up drastically, and COVID-19 has actually also contributed to that. And also at the same time, you find that the family planning in our area is greater than anywhere else in the country, though it used to be lower than anywhere else in the country. When you come to visit Bwindi, and I hope a lot of you will, like Jean did when she went to Rwanda, you'll be told that you have to keep a 7-meter distance away when you get to the gorillas. However, we conducted research and found that 98% of the time, tourists went closer than 7 meters. And so during the COVID-19 pandemic, we joined the Ministry of Health Task Force, and we worked closely with the Uganda Wildlife Authority and other partners to improve the viewing rules, where now you have to wear masks, you have to stay 10 meters away, and you have to get your temperature taken, all to protect the mountain gorillas. We also train gorilla guardians who herd them back, so that when they go to community land, we make sure that they're also healthy and hygienic, and they don't make the gorillas sick and herd them back away from the people. We worked with Ride for a Woman, a local entrepreneur. They used to make tablecloths for tourists, but during the pandemic, we've got them to make masks. And where there are no tourists, at least some of the women are able to earn an income. We also have we started a global brand, Gorilla Conservation Coffee, to save gorillas one sip at a time, where we work with farmers who are bordering the park. And as you track gorillas, you meet these farmers. And we found that they were not getting a steady market or a fair price. So we basically work with about 500 farmers, and we buy their coffee at above market price and sell it at the shop like that. That's a duty-free shop at the airport, which before that, we got an order from them in March 2020, the busiest customer, and they never ordered again till December because of the pandemic. And something that we could say about them is that we made us realize that we needed to find another market for the coffee farmers during the pandemic, with all the lockdowns all over the world. And so one thing that we did is we started to look for other customers in other countries. A donation from every bag sold supports our work. And so this was really, really important to the mission and vision of CTPH. And what we do is we found distributors in US. Pangos.com was our first distributor outside Uganda. But unfortunately, during the pandemic, they couldn't buy coffee because of the lockdowns. And we got a new distributor in the UK, Maniro Beans, which meant that there were fewer people we reduced the people who had to enter the park to poach just to survive during the pandemic. This gorilla, one of my favorite gorillas, Rafiki, he was killed by a poacher, unfortunately, in June last year, because people had become so hungry and desperate with no money from tourism. And this poacher was trying to eat duiker and bush pig, came across Rafiki and killed him. This was very sad. And made us start to provide fast-growing seedlings for the local community. And when we went to check on Rafiki's group 1 month later, We found that the group had reduced in size from 17 to 11, and the oldest blackback was now looking after the group. But some good news is that this year, in January, one baby has been born to that group, which is at least very encouraging. We really need a lot of support for our work. And oops, I'm trying to get to the next slide, please. How can you support us? Please buy Gorilla Conservation Coffee, become a distributor for us. We're looking for many more distributors. We have one in America. We're looking for many more in America because we need to buy all the coffee of the 500 farmers, and we're only able to buy about coffee from about 20. Visit us, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and thank you so much for all your support through this difficult time and always. We hope that with your support, we'll continue to grow the numbers of mountain gorillas and gorillas all over Africa. Thank you.
Wow, terrific presentation, Gladys. Thanks so much. You're using so many different interventions to basically attack both the challenge and the opportunities here. So Augustine, I want to go first to you with some questions. First of all, your personal story of crossing the Atlantic twice is just so amazing. But I think that really created in you this passion around getting rid of plastics in our world. But it's a tall order, isn't it? And it seems to me you really need to see behavior change, not just from consumers, not just from companies, but from governments too. What are some of the biggest barriers that you're facing as you really work with those three segments?
So what we realize is that we all have a role to play, right? And it's very easy with such a big obstacle and challenge we are facing in unplastifying our world to make others responsible. So our first obstacle, it's always to empower whoever we are talking to. Okay, your role could be this, because if not, companies are like, oh no, until regulation is in place, we cannot do anything, and or customers don't ask for it. So we're always thinking of what can others do. We have to think what we can do in each of our roles, from government, from companies, from the nonprofit sector, and as educators as well.
And if there are companies that are part of this session this morning tuning in, you have the ability to work with all of them. And so how would you recommend they follow up if they have an interest in maybe talking to you or learning more about your program?
Well, they can definitely look into our website, which is unplastify.com. We are focused in Latin America, but we are already working with many multinational companies like Disney. So we are happy to see how we can collaborate and help you throughout this process of unplastifying your own companies.
Great. And Gladys, a question for you. We're obviously living through a global pandemic, and for many people, it's the first time they really have paid attention to this idea that disease can jump between species, as we've seen in the past. Of course, there's been a lot of study, and we featured in the National Geographic magazine and in other places, you know, the relationship perhaps between the pangolin and the bat and any roles they have in this pandemic. Has that helped you in your work with villagers, particularly as they think about how they both keep themselves healthy, but how they protect the gorillas?
Yes, the pandemic has been as difficult as it has been. People have finally understood what we've been trying to do all these years. You know, since founding conservation through public health 17 years ago, they're like, oh, finally we get it. You know, diseases can easily jump from animals to people and from people to animals. And so it's been easier for us to explain why it's very important that people have to be healthy and hygienic and shouldn't eat bushmeat, and why we shouldn't make, you know, the cousins, our gorillas, sick, because they benefit so much from them. So it's been much easier, but it's also been really easy to educate the tourists who have actually been the people who get just too close to the gorillas when they come to visit. I'm sure you saw that when you're in Rwanda. And we've actually had tourists demanding that they won't book their permit if they're going to make gorillas or chimpanzees sick. So that hopefully the pandemic has taught people that wearing masks, social distancing, washing your hands is the new norm, because they're hearing it all the time.
And I think people who haven't really focused on the issues around the gorillas don't understand this role that fighting poverty plays in saving gorillas. And, one of the great videos you have out there is you working with a former poacher now who is actually growing coffee, right, to work in your social enterprise. Talk a little bit about how that social enterprise has taken people out. You touched on it in your presentation, but it's given them other opportunities for both revenue and feeding their families.
Yes, I mean, we really got into gorilla conservation coffee because we realized people were not getting a fair market or a steady price. And so we found out that a lot of those poachers were going into the park just to survive because they weren't getting enough money from coffee. And if they needed meat, they would just go and hunt an animal. And yet it's some of the best coffee in the world. I mean, it earned 92 points on Coffee Review in 2018 and was among the top 30 coffees in the world they sampled. Very good Arabica coffee. And so we thought, why not create a global brand to save gorillas by supporting the people living around them and reducing their need to enter the park to poach. And so it's gone really well. But one thing I can say is that it was also affected by the pandemic because most of our customers were tourists. And we really now are looking out to get distributors from other countries. We were very happy to get the one in the UK because flights could still fly from Uganda to England. But unfortunately, in America, there was a lockdown for a number of months, and that person has just reordered this month. And it would be wonderful if some of the companies on the GreenBiz conference can support our social enterprise by, becoming distributors for gorilla conservation coffee. Because people realized during the pandemic that if you want to save the gorillas or help them, you don't only have to visit them as a tourist, but just by buying a bag of gorilla conservation coffee, you're helping to protect the gorillas and their habitats.
Right, and you so clearly have demonstrated the positive impact of these efforts in the growth in the population, as you talked about. So Augustina, as you think about this future big challenge with plastics, I know your view it can't just be about recycling. We need more innovation. We need to change a picture of the world. So talk to us about some inspirational things you're seeing there, which is taking us away from producing all this plastic and recycling it.
Well, we realize that recycling is just simply not enough. I have worked in recycling for many years, and I realized that it takes too much effort. So we need to stop relying on recycling. So that is one of our key ingredients to our approach to tackle the problem at source. It's all about avoiding. And the other two ingredients are the power of yes, because we use always a positive message, and we use real stories to inspire instead of going to the negative, right? Like try to inspire people to take action. And lastly, we work through empowerment because we don't believe we can convince every individual in the world to care and to change, but we empower these change makers to make it easy to others. So we unplastify people that they don't even realize that they're being unplastified. That's the key.
And do you have best practices that you've published so that companies or consumers or anyone listening today can go to and get a sense of the work?
Yes, so we have published a logbook with all the learnings from the trip, and it has a lot of our key learnings and messages and insights. And we are now working on a manifest in which we will publish everything I'm sharing with you today with more detail on how do we believe we can unplastify the world and why.
That's great. Well, ladies, you inspire us with the work that you do, both so fearless and so powerful and passionate in all that you're taking forward. I want to thank you for our time together today, and thanks especially to the audience that's joined us.
Thank you so much, Jean, and National Geographic, and all the audience of the GreenBiz conference. And come visit Uganda, come and see the gorillas. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And save gorillas by buying coffee and becoming a distributor. Thank you.